Many IELTS test takers score low in IELTS speaking because they don't know what the examiner is looking for. There are things you can do that make your score go up and others that make your score go down like this. If you want to know what you have to do to get a high IELTS speaking score, this video is for you. By the end of this video, you will know 11 secrets to score high. By the way, guys, if you're going to take your IELTS soon, check out my IELTS materials. There, I teach you everything you need to score high. I show you step by step how to give high scoring answers. And of course, we do many practice tests together, so you will feel confident for your test. You can find the link to my course in the description box. And now, let's get started. First, you must know what you're getting scored on. You can only get a high IELTS speaking score if you know how the examiner marks your answer. There are 4 categories that the examiner looks for. The first is fluency and coherence. That basically means, do you talk smoothly and make sense? If the examiner has no idea what you mean, you get a low score. So how can you improve your score for fluency and coherence? There is an easy way to do this, guys, namely by using linking words, such as however, furthermore, consequently, and so on, because this allows you to join ideas in a logical way. The second category is lexical resource. That's just a fancy way to say vocabulary. To get a high score in this category, you must use a variety of words and paraphrase ideas. For example, instead of just saying I think, you can say I feel or I believe. This makes your score go up. The third scoring category is grammar. Yes, that means that you need to have good sentence structures. You also need to use different structures. Vary your sentences so that they are long and short ones. Lastly, there is a 4th category which is called pronunciation. This refers to how well the examiner can understand your words. Make sure you speak clearly so the examiner can understand what you're talking about. One really important point is that there is no right or wrong answer to the questions. You are not scored on creativity or viewpoint. Therefore, don't think too long about what to say. If you do this, there will be a long pause and the examiner will think that you don't have the vocabulary to talk about this topic. Just say what comes to mind. Don't worry about trying to be unique. This is absolutely not necessary. In fact, every time I take the IELTS speaking test, I'm a bit nervous. So I definitely don't come up with a super original idea. What I do instead is focusing on giving clear answers that answer the question completely, using a wide variety of vocabulary and grammatical structures, because this is what gets you points. The other important thing to know about the scoring is that the whole speaking section is graded as one unit. You don't get a separate score for parts 1, 2, and 3. In other words, you need to do well in all the sections to get a high IELTS speaking score. You can't assume that doing well on one task will raise the average. You need to speak consistently throughout. Now, let's have a look at a trap many IELTS test takers fall into. The IELTS speaking examiner will pose traps to check your speaking skills. If you know these traps, you can easily avoid them. What the examiners often do is changing the time frame of the question. It's a way to test verb use. Pay attention to that. For example, you may say that you like reading. Then the examiner asks a past tense question. Did you like reading when you were a child? Or when did you learn to read? Pay attention here, guys. The examiner asks, did you? So they want you to talk about the past. If you answer, I love reading as a child, you will lose points. Why? Because you didn't use the past tense. Instead, if you say, I loved reading as a child, you will get full points. So always pay attention to whether the question is related to the past, present, or future. Next, one common mistake that many IELTS test takers make is to try answering the question although they don't understand it. They do this because they are scared to ask the examiner to repeat the question, because they think their score will go down. Guys, that's not true. You will not lose points for asking what the examiner means. For example, you can ask, would you please repeat the question? I didn't hear it. Or, sorry, could you explain what you mean? If you ask questions like these, that's totally fine. Because what you are doing here is called lexical repair. This means you can identify problems in a conversation and fix them. It's a good communication skill. You won't be marked down for using lexical repair correctly. Before you take your speaking test, think about which questions you can ask the examiner in such a situation. It's okay to memorize a few questions. It's actually really helpful because if you don't understand something, you may panic. And then it's great if you can easily remember a question that you can ask the examiner. It's like a life belt. If you don't ask and just give some answer, this can go terribly wrong because if your answer doesn't relate to the question, you will be marked down. This brings us to the next point. You need to answer the question that the examiner asks you. That sounds easy, but many test takers don't stay on topic and lose points this way. For example, if the examiner asks whether you like cooking in your free time, you can answer, no, I don't really like cooking. When I have time off, I prefer reading. That's a good answer. You say no, so you refer to the original topic, which is cooking, but gave an alternative. By contrast, look at this answer. My favorite hobby is reading. My favorite genre is mystery. Where's the cooking, guys? The examiner asked you whether you like cooking in your free time. If you say it like this, you don't refer to the topic at all. So the examiner doesn't know if you like cooking. As a result, you will get points off because you didn't answer the question. So the takeaway is to always stay on topic. Don't forget to do this when taking your speaking test. By the way, guys, if this video is helpful to you, hit the like button. It means a lot to me, really. Also, comment down below whether you find IELTS speaking easy or difficult. I would love to know how you feel about it. Now, let's check out an extremely important point, guys. It's a fantastic trick. I always use this trick when taking the speaking test, and it always works. What am I talking about? Buying yourself time. That's an easy way to get more time to answer a question and improve your score. Since you are scored on fluency and coherence, your answer needs to make sense. That means you may have to take a moment to think about what to say. Maybe you just don't have an idea immediately because you're nervous. This always happens to me. I'm always nervous. So what do? You gain time by saying something like, that's an interesting question, or I haven't thought about that before. While you're saying this, you can think about how to answer the question. That way, your pause is a natural part of the conversation because you're talking. Always remember that you will get a higher score with a short pause than by rushing into an answer that is poorly organized. There is another big point that the IELTS speaking examiner is looking for. Many test takers don't do this because they don't know that it's important. And then their score goes down like this. Guys, the examiner wants you to extend your answers. So you must absolutely do that. What do I mean by extending your answers? Let's have a look at this example. Lots of questions can be answered yes or no. For example, for the question, do you like reading? You can answer yes. This answers the question, but it doesn't get you a high IELTS speaking score. Why? Because you don't show your English skills. If you only answer yes, how should the examiner know how good your English is? They can't know. You can only show that your English is good if you elaborate on your answer. So a yes or no is not enough. Instead, make every answer 2 or 3 sentences long. For instance, you can say, yes, I love books. I often read in the evenings after work. My favorite genre is mystery, but I read a lot of historical fiction too. That answer varies sentence length, answers the question, and paraphrases the idea of reading with books to show off your vocabulary. In other words, make your answers long enough to show off your language skills. Now comes what may be the biggest misunderstanding regarding IELTS speaking. Many IELTS test takers think they have to use complex and extremely formal language in IELTS speaking. Guys, this is not true. Actually, you get a lower score if you do that. Let me give you an example. If the IELTS speaking examiner asks you whether you like reading, don't answer like this. In my considered opinion, a proclivity towards literary pursuits is a pleasurable occupation. Guys, have you ever talked like this? Probably not, right? Imagine I was talking like that in this video. You would probably think, what's going on? What is she doing? This is weird. So don't do it in IELTS speaking. Instead, make the discussion sound like a conversation with someone you have just met. Think of the examiner as, for example, a person sitting next to you on an airplane who asks you a few questions about yourself. Use vocabulary you know well and don't worry about trying to sound too formal. For instance, you can say it like this: I absolutely love reading. This is grammatically correct, friendly and conversational, so it's a much better answer. What comes now is crucial, guys. Many test takers score low because of that, because they don't know how to handle it. We're talking about making mistakes. No matter how careful you are, you will still make mistakes in IELTS speaking. It just happens because it's a stressful situation and you're nervous. The important thing is how you deal with mistakes. The worst thing you can do is panic and freeze when you realize that you have made a mistake, because then the examiner will think that you don't know how to correct your mistake, and this will make your score go down. So, if you make a mistake, correct yourself. You won't lose points for corrections if there are only a couple. In fact, correcting yourself is part of lexical repair. That's fixing the conversation when there are problems. You identify the problem, then fix it. That's a good thing. For example, you can say, correcting errors, is an important skill. This way you show that you saw the error and you made sure that the examiner wasn't confused. Before taking the IELTS, practice fixing your mistakes quickly so that they don't interrupt your discussion too much. Now, let's talk about a common misconception about IELTS speaking. Many test takers think that speaking fast improves their score, but that's not true. It can ruin your score. Don't do it. I know what I'm talking about. I've made this mistake in the past. Why? Because I thought I have to show the examiner that I can speak fast. I thought that this would get me a high score. But this is not the case. In fact, if you speak fast, your words and ideas all blend together, and it's harder to understand. And if the examiner can't understand what you're talking about, they can't give you points. Let me give you a little demonstration. I'm going to say that last sentence fast so you can see what I mean. In fact, if you speak fast, your words and ideas all blend together and it's harder to understand. Can you see it? Now, you probably understand why the examiner isn't happy if you do that. You must make their job easy. Give the examiner a chance to give you a high score. We will move on to a question that I get all the time. Juva, I have an accent. Will I score low because of that? The answer is no, you won't get a low score if you have an accent. Everyone has a little sound from their native language. That's normal. The IELTS examiners are experienced and can understand the difference between accents and language skills. If you can speak clearly and make sense, it's okay. The examiner pays attention to how hard it is to understand. If it's easy to listen and know what you mean, you get a high score. Therefore, don't try to use a fake British or American accent. Those just make you sound silly. Instead, practice using intonations, because otherwise you will sound like a robot. Let me give you an example. If you don't raise and lower your voice, you sound like a robot. Here's the same sentence with intonations. If you don't raise and lower your voice, you sound like a robot. So use English pacing and intonation and try to pronounce things clearly, but don't try too hard to hide your native accent. That's it. That's 11 IELTS speaking secrets you must know to get a high score. I hope you guys liked this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, share this video with your friends so they can improve their IELTS speaking score too. See you in the next video.